Okay, folks. Today's sponsor, in fact, sponsoring us, I think over the course of the next week or so, is Just Coffee, the longest sponsor we have had on this program. They're the ones who actually tipped me off to the Cernovich situation. They started back in Air America. This week, MR25 gets you 25% off of all coffee from Just Coffee. But first, I want to talk about food flavorings. When you get flavored coffee beans, they're not flavored with actual ingredients that you'd keep in the kitchen. They are chemical flavorings that trick your brain into thinking that they taste like holiday cinnamon joy. I'm not even sure what that is, but did you ever wonder what's in those flavors? Flavorings, so-called, they're one of the ingredients, and there's lots more, is called propylene glycol. A public health statement released from the CDC about exposure to propylene glycol starts out with this. This information is important because this substance may harm you. The effects of exposure to any hazardous substance depends on the dose, duration, how you're exposed, personal traits, habits, whether other chemicals are present. And then it defines propylene glycol as propylene glycol is a synthetic liquid substance that absorbs water. Delish. Propylene glycol is also used to make polyester. The FDA has classified propylene glycol as an additive that is generally recognized for safe in use of food, which is, of course, an iffy statement. The bottom line is the ingredients of my favorite coffee, I'll tell you what it is. Coffee. That's it. Just coffee. If you need flavorings in your coffee, add flavorings yourself. You can add ingredients you know and understand. Don't let companies add them for you. And Just Coffee has you covered with clean, great coffee. This is a co-op that is interested in sustainability, is interested in their farmers, is interested in you, and obviously the principles around a co-op. Check it out, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee. MR25 gets you 25% off of all their coffees. And this is the new Majority Report blend logo. Okay, now time for the show.
With Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Wait.
Yes.
August 20th, 2024. This is we are broadcasting. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, day one at the Democratic National Convention draws big protests and a big send-off for Joe Biden, who is just now wrapping up his speech. That's a joke. Unity and stories of Republican bans of abortion front and center on night one. Also on the program, we'll be joined by Jasper Nathaniel, writer of the Infinite Jaz newsletter on SubStack, with a piece he's done for Zeteo on just one example of what's going on in the West Bank. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Blinken pretends Israel has accepted a new ceasefire deal. They're calling it sort of like a truce deal, which is sort of like a bridge deal, which is really nothing. At the DNC, Harris calls for 25% corporate tax rate, still smaller than it was under Bill Clinton. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders calls for a Democratic Party super PAC ban in their primaries. Elon Musk's Twitter takeover now considered the worst buyout for banks since the great financial crisis. Convicted felon and also Senator Bob Menendez to resign the Senate seat by the end of the day. And speaking of former lawmakers going to jail, George Santos pleads guilty. Could get more than 2 years. Cornell University workers to strike. New poll shows Harris leading Trump in Nebraska's second, which is a key solitary electoral vote. Mexico's judiciary goes on strike over a proposal to make them elected positions. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is
Newsday Tuesday.
Newsday Tuesday. Where's Emma?
I'm here.
There she is. Okay. We're going to basically go over the DNC last night. I tried to stream it, and it did not work. I tried to do it from home. I couldn't get the OBS to work on my computer. It was very glitchy, but we're going to try again tonight. Certainly by Wednesday, we'll have a more robust coverage. But last night, I mean, there was no huge craziness. Emma, did you watch the thing? I didn't. I had to watch Biden's speech this morning.
I did. I stayed up for Biden's speech, although, it was hard to capture my attention at that time, both in the way that he delivers his speech and also because it was so late. But yeah, it was the coverage is now focused on the fact that he was bumped out of primetime because of all the delays, and his aides are leaking to the press that they take this as some sort of snub. At the end of the day, though, no one who isn't just like obsessed with politics is even paying attention to that story.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And there's been a couple of different things that I've read as to why they ran so late. One of the things I've heard, I have not confirmed this, but that at one point protesters outside, and there weren't as tens of thousands as anticipated, but there were certainly thousands upon thousands. Some had broken through the perimeter at one point, and apparently that shut a lot of stuff down. And there were reports that's why things got kicked off a little later than they had assumed. And if that's the case, kudos, because you want to basically, as you're protesting these things, you want to communicate to really the Harris campaign that this is going to be difficult. We're going to make this more difficult for you going forward. And let's be clear, and we'll talk more about this later. The polling shows that this is a political position that would help Harris, aside from just the clear moral responsibility that's there. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. The most fun moment of the evening, for me personally, was this one where Sean Fain, and we should say Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, apparently basically got ghosted by the Democratic Party. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, but I don't know if from a tactical strategic level, if that's the best move to make. But for the Democrats, but nevertheless, Sean Fain was speaking on the first night, and I don't remember there being at least in my lifetime, or at least in my sort of more adult lifetime, there being a more popular union leader than Sean Fain. And here he is. I came up wearing a shirt. You could sort of see what was going on with the jacket, but then I apparently got very hot in the convention hall.
For the UAW and for working class people everywhere, this election comes down to one question. Which side are you on? On one side, we have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who have stood shoulder to shoulder with the working class. On the other side, we have Trump and Vance. Two lapdogs for the billionaire class who only serve themselves. So for us in the labor movement, it's real simple. Kamala Harris is one of us. She's a fighter for the working class. And Donald Trump is a scab. That's not just my opinion. That's a fact.
Wait, do we have the moment where he takes his coat off?
He takes his coat off. We'll find that. You may have gotten a hint as to what this T-shirt says based on
Yes. Here we go.
some of what he said during that speech. Yeah, we got it here. He took it off.
In the words of the great American poet, Nellie, it's getting hot in here. It's hot in here.
You know, the thing I love about this is obviously, you know, I like Trump being called a scab, but I also like the term scab being, you know, introduced back into the lexicon in such an unmitigated sort of like disfavorable way. I mean,
as people in the audience hold up Union Yes signs.
Yeah,
and he
I mean,
chants,
this
Trump's a
is
scab. Yeah,
I just don't like, you know, I mean, maybe I just haven't, you know, there wasn't as much focus in the past on it, or maybe I wasn't paying as much attention. But like this type of like of union militancy, you know, and this is just a rally, but it is a rally in the sort of like the, you know, the what is the mainstream of the Democratic Party, and for unionism to be so full-throatedly cheered, and the idea of being a scab being associated with Donald Trump. That's pretty good. I mean, you know, one of the ways I get my kids to behave at times, I'm like, I say, you are acting like Donald Trump. And so if these things can be internalized,
Cutting.
that's
Wow.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember like being so full-throatedly pro-union. I mean, when I was hearing about unions as a young teenager, it's like, are these or strikes, for instance? It'd be like strikes. They seem kind of scary and bad,
Yes.
maybe. And now we're calling people scabs. So
Yep.
interesting.
It's
Exactly.
definitely different. And, you know, there's facts behind it. I mean, Trump said he was going to keep the jobs in the United States, but there was that infamous case of the General Motors plant in, I guess it was in Ohio, where he particularly said, don't move, don't sell your house. We will keep this plant here. And the plant moved, and Trump didn't do anything about it. And so there's like both a material track record and, of course, the obvious politics of the Republican Party, but for Trump specifically, that the UAW has decided they're, you know, I think Sean Fain has rightfully decided to take that on head on, which I am appreciative of.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can recall when Biden ended up walking the picket line, Trump, in sort of competition with him, met with auto workers or workers who weren't working specifically in the plants, but working sort of like subsidiary parts manufacturers.
Right.
And they were all non-union shops.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Trump was basically, he wasn't really hiding the ball very much.
And, you know, O'Brien mentioned Amazon at his RNC speech. Fain mentioned Stellantis over and calling them out over the idled plant that he's trying to get reopened and restarted. So I like that sort of immediate tactical approach too.
Yep. That's a great platform in which to leverage some of that. All right. In a moment, we're going to just a couple of words from their sponsors. We're going to go through a couple other highlights from night one at the DNC. But first, as you know, warm weather brings outdoor activities. In fact, I'm going to the beach soon, hopefully, next couple of days. You grill up some burgers, hot dogs for dinner, pickleball on the weekends. Not necessarily for me. Golf leagues. I never play golf, but I do go outside and I do go to the beach. And with all that time spent in the sun, what does it do to your hair? Doesn't matter whether it's the hat you're constantly wearing that rubs against your hair, causing stress, or sun affecting your scalp and hair. Right now is the perfect time to start taking Nutrafol to help keep your hair healthy this summer. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are physician formulated using 100% drug-free ingredients. Their patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sex life. I started taking Nutrafol, I guess it was now almost over a year ago. I was getting a little thinning up here. I mean, I'm getting old. And I figured why go down with a fight, without a fight rather. And it doesn't compromise your sex life, as it says, and it's all drug free. And so I've had great success with it. I still take it every day. In fact, I was reminded to take it when I saw the ad. Many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies. What Nutrafol does is they have clinical tests that test the entire formulation. So what you actually end up taking, they have tested specifically that combination. And in clinical studies, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol's men hair growth supplement. You can take their hair wellness quiz on Nutrafol.com/men for a personalized hair health plan based on your specific root causes. That is not a pun. With Nutrafol, building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription or doctor's visits required. Free shipping and automated deliveries ensure you'll never miss a day. You will see results in 3 to 6 months, and you'll be reminded to take it when you hear the sound of my voice. Take the first step towards achieving your hair growth goals. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription. Free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men. Enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. Put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. Also, you know those detergent pods you put in your dishwasher? You know how they keep all that stuff together? Like what surrounds it? Plastic.
Ugh.
And you know how when you open up your dishwasher, all of it's gone? Where do you think that goes? That plastic doesn't just disappear. It breaks down and it gets on your plates and it goes into our oceans and our rivers and our soil. Well, Blue Land is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. Blue Land uses no single-use plastic in any component. Its bottles, its tablets, and its wrappers to its shipping. Their tablet packaging is fully compostable. Blue Land products are effective and affordable. Their dishwasher tablets are proven to perform on baked on, burnt on stains. No rinse aid is needed. These things are great. They clean the dishes. I don't get any of that filmy stuff. And there's no plastic around them. And the beauty is I don't need to lug a big jug home from the supermarket. I don't need to have this box that I just wonder, like, where's this plastic going? Oh, that was part of my dinner. You can get more savings too with Blue Land by buying refills in bulk or setting up a subscription. And bulk refills are basically a compostable bag full of tablets that you mix with water, and you get your all-purpose cleaner, your bathroom cleaner, your windows cleaner. You get your dishwasher tablets, Blue Land's trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners right now. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. You don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/majority, 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority. Get 15% off. Again, we'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. All right, let's get back into the DNC last night. They gave Joe Biden like a 10-minute applause when he first came out. Maybe we'll get to that in a moment. But first thing that we wanted to play was clip number
13.
What was 13? Oh yeah, this was maybe a trigger alert here. I mean, this is both really in many respects disturbing, but also incredibly powerful. There were at least 3 sort of speeches given specifically about the impact of the Supreme Court getting rid of an individual right that has existed in this country for 51 years in the Dobbs case, striking down Roe v. Wade, essentially allowing for a third of the states in the country basically to have abortion bans, and creating incredible health risks for women outside of course, just diminishing their power to have control over their own bodies. And these stories of women who nearly lost their lives or their opportunity to sort of like dictate their fate were really, really powerful. You know, they try and sell these idea that there are exceptions to these abortion bans, and the exceptions are a joke. We'll have examples of that maybe later in the program, but this one really struck me. This is a Kentucky resident, Hadley Duvall. She is speaking about her experience of being raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Again, disturbing, but really important, and speaks directly to some of the absolute sort of like bizarre weirdness and just sort of disregard for women that Republicans have really been one of the organizing principles of their political project over the past 20 years, 40 years.
Growing up, I was an all-American girl. Varsity soccer captain, cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, and survivor. I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. At age 12, I took my first pregnancy test, and it was positive. That was the first time I was ever told, you have options. I can't imagine not having a choice. But today, that's the reality for many women and girls across the country because of Donald Trump's abortion bans. He calls it a beautiful thing. What is so beautiful about a child having to carry her parent's child? There are other survivors out there who have no options. And I want you to know that we see you. We hear you. Kamala Harris will sign a national law to restore the right to an abortion. She will fight for every woman and every girl, even those who are not fighting for her.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. And it's incredible for all of these right-wingers who have this kind of paternalistic view of women, and they're often talking about protecting women or protecting children for that matter, you know, from the scary pedophiles and the groomers and the LGBTQ people. They're this exact same people who are supporting these abortion bans that have these window dressing exceptions that are not actionable and that would subject a 12-year-old little girl like Hadley there to having to give birth to her stepfather's baby. Like, I mean, and you know, she was the subject, I think, of an ad that the Biden campaign put out because her story is both so visceral, but also, unfortunately, not exceptional and is going to be less exceptional as this continues.
What's exceptional is her ability to speak out about it.
Yeah.
Because it's the most horrible thing.
The most horrible thing. And she says that Harris would sign abortion rights into law. Now, that would require, by the way, a filibuster exemption, if that's the case, which would be interesting. I would like to hear more about how she would do that. But we know from reporting about the Biden campaign, they thought that his moderate position on abortion was the thing that was helping the Democrats in the midterms in 2022, because Biden's uncomfortable with the notion. I know, it's insane. He's uncomfortable with abortion as a Catholic, as if I care about that. And he thought that because, according to reporting on what his staff was telling him, that him being more moderate and not, remember when Elizabeth Warren wanted to use federal lands for abortion care?
Right.
He kind of let that die on the vine. And that was some of what he was being told by his advisors, that was a way to look more reasonable and smart, which is why I'm just so thrilled that we're past that. But if Harris should show some daylight on that, and I just think a standard Democrat and a woman will instinctively probably have better thoughts on that, but still, it'd be interesting to see, is she in favor of eliminating the filibuster or creating some sort of exemption to codify Roe?
That was, and there was a couple more clips of people talking about that. Maybe we will play that later. There was, AOC probably gave the biggest sort of sidewinder of a speech in terms of also how the crowd was reacting to her. And maybe we'll play some, other clips of her talking. But the big story in terms of basically there's two stories, right, with the DNC. One is how does the packaged presentation, basically, this real life PowerPoint play to the American public, and what does it do in terms of creating narratives within the press? And I think overall, from that perspective, the Democrats got to be pretty happy. I mean, Biden went late, but I don't think that's just sort of like a small detail in the presentation. Largely, the crowd seemed incredibly enthusiastic, and it was basically at the Hulk Hogan level for the entire time, relative to the
and she
Republican
came after
Party.
Sean Fain, right? And a lot of the speech was focused on workers and the working class, which that was the part that I really appreciated. But the Gaza, the ceasefire mention, I have my thoughts. I know.
All right. Well, let's talk about that, because the other part of the DNC is what's playing out in terms of pushing Kamala Harris on the question of Gaza. Just the other thing that was going on that a lot of people basically said sounds like maybe a victory is that Gina Raimondo, who is sort of a famous neoliberal governor from Rhode Island, now Commerce Secretary, she espoused the value of antitrust and spoke of monopolies in her speech, which a lot of people took as like, okay, that battle's over. But let's look at how Gaza was spoken about in the first night of the convention. Here is AOC, and speaking about Gaza, great speech otherwise, but this was a little bit cookie cutter in my estimation. And Emma has some thoughts too, I imagine.
Kamala Harris, we have a chance to elect a president who is for the middle class because she is from the middle class. She understands the urgency of rent checks and groceries and prescriptions. She is as committed to our reproductive and civil rights as she is to taking on corporate greed. And she is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
Okay, no, she's not, because she's the vice president. Biden's doing this.
And he's not doing that either.
And he's doing a bad job.
Well, he's not doing it. He's lying about doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Blinken's in Egypt right now, claiming that I think it depends on which media you read, but he's claiming that Netanyahu signed on to not a ceasefire, but some type of weird bridge truce thing that is backing off of what Netanyahu had pledged to accept a month and a half ago. And so this is obviously just deployed at this point to keep the protests down. Nobody thinks this is real. We'll play a clip a little bit later.
Don't we kind of think that's why the DNC wanted her speaking tonight, to say that kind of pretend like, hey, we're doing this. The protests don't really have a huge point. Like, kind of feels to me that's why they wanted her to do it.
Well, that was the reporting from Daniel Marins, was that she was asked, not the other way around, which is interesting. And I don't like this because to what we're saying, first of all, saying she's the one working on the ceasefire that isn't going to come to fruition because even Israeli officials are telling Axios that Netanyahu's in the way, ties Harris to a ceasefire negotiation policy that she's not across, that she's in a ceremonial position in the administration. This is the Biden West exec crew, Blinken, leading this. And then secondly, it reinforces this notion of the ceasefire too, when we know exactly what the conditions are, who's holding it up. What I didn't like is, like, I expect someone like Kamala Harris to repeat the line about ceasefire because that's the narrow permission structure of somebody running in a general election for president of the United States. And I want her to go further, and I hope this pushes her to go further. But there's different expectations for someone at the top of a presidential ticket than if somebody who came into Congress as a DSA candidate, as somebody representative of the left, and who months ago was calling it a genocide on the House floor. So her role, in my estimation, should be to go out there and create oxygen for the protesters and for people who are trying to push Harris on this policy. And so,
and for Harris herself, now, regardless of whether Harris wants that or not.
Exactly. So repeating the State Department copy, why do that? Warnock did a much better job, and this was, David Dayen said, or alluded to the fact that this was maybe on ad-libbed because it wasn't in the official transcript, but this seemed to me in his speech more of an effective tactic.
In our humanity as a cough, I need my neighbor's children to be okay so that my children will be okay. I need all of my neighbor's children to be okay. Poor inner city children in Atlanta and poor children of Appalachia. I need the poor children of Israel and the poor children of Gaza. I need Israelis and Palestinians. I need those in the Congo, those in Haiti, those in Ukraine. I need American children on both sides of the track to be okay. Because we are all God's children. And so let's stand together. Let's work together. Let's organize together. Let's pray together. Let's stand together. Let's heal the land. God bless you.
That was better. And they didn't, this ABC feed didn't show it, but when he said Israelis and Palestinians, the MSNBC feed showed the split screen. That's when Harris and Walz stood up. Whatever, this is all ceremonial, who knows. But I just like, I mean, talking about the shared humanity, I would have much preferred for her to do that
Then lie.
than to not be, than to repeat the Biden administration line about the
But
ceasefire
that
right
line
now.
too, in particular, working tirelessly, is literally the exact words that Harris uses every time she's confronted with this, and it is
And Biden too.
and it's the thing is that there is even if I was to accept that premise, there is a willful refusal to use the leverage that would make it a lot less tiring. I mean, you know, you can, the bottom line is, it's one thing to say, like, we're working this, you know, in the most inefficient and most ineffective way possible, but we're doing it a lot.
We're going up a hill on a bike and we're using the first gear. Why don't you just switch to the higher gear?
With the brake too.
Right,
Exactly.
right. And she also centered the hostages. Again, this is just copy and paste, as opposed to like the reality of what the Israeli government is doing, which is sacrificing the hostages for genocide. And I'm shocked to see when she came on the House floor a few months ago and said this is genocide and had strong language. This is a very different tactic that she's taking, and they kept cutting to Kathy Hochul in the middle of her speech. Maybe she wants to run for governor, maybe she wants to take Schumer's seat. But I think that we're at a point now where we should be observing the fact that she's making some moves away from the left when she first got elected in 2018.
Another indicator of that is saying middle class when working class should be the term that a socialist elected uses. So, she's making a pivot.
She did say it a good amount in the speech, working class, but that's the Harris
I would
line.
remove middle class from my vocabulary, but she's on a different trajectory right now, and good luck.
Yeah.
All right, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Jasper Nathaniel. He is a writer on the Infinite Jaz newsletter on Substack, and has just written a piece for Zeteo, which I think is just about being published at this moment, about it's a story of a settler in the West Bank who who shot a Palestinian, and the incredible refusal of the Israeli system to hold this guy accountable. It's fascinating. We're going to take a quick break. We will do more clips from the DNC later in the program, catch you up on some of the other highlights. But first, quick break, then Jasper Nathaniel. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Jasper Nathaniel. He is the writer of the Infinite Jaz newsletter on Substack. Jasper, thanks for joining us. You just had a piece that was published in Zeteo. Before we get that, I mean, if people have been following your Substack, they know that since October 7th, you started to report from the West Bank. Why the West Bank?
Well, good question. Actually, I was right after October 7th. By the way, thanks for having me, Sam, Emma, team. I was doing a lot of reporting on the way October 7th was sort of manifesting in New York, and I was covering the protests, and I went down to DC for the big March for Palestine. And I was getting so wrapped up in the culture war here that I sort of felt myself becoming like detached from the actual war that was going on. And honestly, I wanted to just get a little bit closer, just to sort of reground myself in what this was all about. To be honest, I did look for about 10 minutes if there was a way to get to Gaza. very quickly decided that was not going to happen for a number of reasons. So then I just put out some feelers and figured out that I could get into the West Bank.
What, I'm just curious, like broadly speaking, what was your perceptions of the West Bank beforehand? I mean, you know, I think you've written and spoken about how you were raised Jewish, and you had this perspective on Israel that came from that background. But I'm curious as to your perspective on the West Bank before you went there.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, look, I knew that there was, I knew what was going on there for the most part. I understood there was a military occupation, of course. I understood that there were, it's a literal apartheid state there, two sets of laws for two different people. I had read a lot of what there was to read, but there was just something essential that I didn't actually quite understand until I went there. And the way I've described it, it's the pervasiveness of the cruelty. It's not as if, you have Palestinians going about living their normal lives and then, they run into a roadblock or they run into a soldier in a bad mood or something. It's everywhere. It's like in the air. The soldiers, the settlers are making their lives hell in every way imaginable. And, honestly, like a lot of people have said to me, how did you not know that? And I don't know, I guess I didn't fully understand it. But once I got there, I realized, there's just simply no escaping the cruelty when you're in the West Bank if you're a Palestinian.
Tell us the story of Zakaria al-Adra. Like, how did you meet him, his family, and then did you know them before this situation took place?
No, the first time I went to the West Bank was in January. And I wanted to visit Masafer Yatta, which is a region in the South Hebron Hills, which it's been in the news a fair amount lately for people who pay attention to this stuff. There's been some really great reporting in 972 magazine about it. The reason this place is under such a brutal siege is because in the 80s, it was named a military training zone. Which basically, it means exactly what it sounds like. Soldiers can just be firing their weapons there and running drills and things like that. And actually at the time, Ariel Sharon, who was a military leader of some sort at that time, explicitly said, we're doing this, we're making this a military training zone so that we can claim it as Jewish land for later. So, the pretext was just that, a pretext. And he was very explicit about that. But for decades, there's been this battle between the Palestinians there and the government and the military who are trying to get them out. It escalated in 2022 when a Supreme Court decision basically rejected their appeal to being displaced. But what makes it so there's this sort of government and military siege. But what makes it even worse is that you have these really brutal settlers who live in this region. Some of the, what I write about in the article, of course, is like the roots of these Jewish terrorists, many of whom actually come from this area. But anyway, to get back to your question, I'm sure we'll get to that stuff. I went to this village at Tuwani, and I was just introduced to Zachariah and his family. I had seen the video of him getting shot 2 months earlier, but I didn't know him at all. And while I was talking to him, he was telling me his story. He had actually just gotten out of the hospital that day. While I was talking to him, we hear this like commotion outside, and the settlers had come back, as they do almost every day, with their giant guns. Some of them were probably soldiers. You can't tell the difference because the settlers dress like soldiers now. They came back, they started firing their weapons in the air, pushing the shepherds around, intimidating, menacing people. And so I'm literally, talking to this man who has been shot by a settler a few months ago. He's with his 4 young children, including newborn twins, right outside the door. The settlers from the outpost who shot him are outside, just menacing and being violent again.
We should say you can see that video on Zateo's website. It's disturbing to watch. I mean, it really is just, there's a real quality to, like, this is just like gang, like they're just a gang but it's not gang warfare. It's just a gang that is coming in and being brutal. And
formalized now, right? I mean, since over the past few months, it was formally given Smotrich, his kind of gang of extremists have basically been given authority over the West Bank, if I'm not mistaken, Jasper, kind of removing all the pretense that this is some sort of military training site, as opposed to designating it as a military training site to make it easier to bulldoze, take homes, kill people, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is in the West Bank, it's like there's violence and destruction, and then sometimes they then sort of retroactively legitimize it with laws. Like a lot of these illegal outposts have been since recognized as settlements, which makes them legal under Israeli law. So like the law to a certain extent doesn't matter because they're either breaking the law and then later it's being legitimized, they're breaking the law or they're not being convicted. Like 3% of violent settlers are ever actually convicted, or they're not breaking the law. They're being violent and destructive within the law. And I should also just say that like what I write about in this article is that the man who shot Zechariah, Yitzhak Nir, his father was a convicted terrorist. He shot up an Islamic university, killed 3 people, wounded 29 others with his brother. And they were part of this movement of really extreme religious, fanatical settlers who were very clear in what their aim was in being in the West Bank. They were there to start a war with the Palestinians that would end in either the death of all the Palestinians or the Palestinians' expulsion. So it's not as if they were there to try to, live there and have a good life and live, potentially in like, side by side. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. They were building outposts in places that they knew were going to cause problems. They were, instigating violence. And, that's exactly what's happened, of course, is like there's this constant violence now.
All right. We just jumped over something, though, that I think is like really sort of what your piece really captures. You named the Jewish settler. I mean, we see the video. We see who shot Zechariah. The guy shows up when Zechariah comes out of the hospital. He's outside the door. They know it. I mean, this is the part that I think is like sort of like the, as if it's like sort of our classic sort of mafia mob gangland thing. But it's like they're all on, not literally on meth, but they're acting like it on some level. But the point is, everybody knows who it is. And so, I mean, take it from there, because this is the part that I don't think that people fully understand. We hear the U.S. government is, making what I think is just sort of like platitudinous issue out of settler violence in the West Bank. And supposedly this isn't even at the level of an apartheid regime where there doesn't seem to be any accountability whatsoever, even in the context of a system that has 2 separate laws. Like, theoretically, it's still not legal for a settler to attempt to kill and shoot just a Palestinian civilian for no reason whatsoever. But so how is this guy identified, and what has been the process of like, has he been reported? Like, why is he now able to continue to terrorize his family?
Let me just first clarify that we don't know that Yitzhak Nir himself has been back to Tawani, but other settlers from the outpost have been back. But okay, so this was also one of the most shocking things to me, which again, in hindsight, especially after seeing what's happening in Gaza, it's like, of course there's no accountability. But to me, it's like, it's on video. Clearly there's no, legitimate claim of self-defense. Like how could this guy still be walking free? So basically, this is what happened. So this was on October 13th. It was, just under a week after October 7th. The civilian security squad at this outpost had just been armed by the military. So they were given assault rifles, American assault rifles, I should say, and military uniforms so that they could, be like conscripted into this war against the Palestinians, really. And what they did is, they went down. The Yitzhak Nir would later claim that he had a report from Shin Bet, which is which is one of the intelligence agencies in Israel, that there was an attack coming from At-Tuwani, which is almost certainly bunk. There's no armed resistance in this village, I should say. Like, these are farmers and shepherds. There's no guns here. There's no violence. So they go down. He claims that after they got this report, they heard a commotion, and they went down for, in their capacity as the armed security. He goes down and he shoots Zechariah. And if you watch the video, you see them sort of like hiding behind a boulder, as if they're in war, when, again, they've just entered this complete peaceful farming village, like hiding behind a boulder, coming out with their guns. And he shoots Zechariah, and then he is called back by a guy in military fatigues, again, as if they're in war. So, like, to a certain extent, they're cosplaying here. They're pretending that they're in a war when they're actually just shooting unarmed people in a farming village. But what happens is, immediately after, and I should say, like, just getting Zechariah to the hospital was a debacle because of all the roadblocks, and he almost bled out in the car on the way there. They couldn't even get an ambulance to him. But what happens is the police, according to the court documents, the police go to investigate the next day. They immediately identify Yitzhak Nir as the man who shot him. I don't know if that was from the video or if somebody just outed him, but like, they immediately knew it was him. He told them that Zechariah intended to throw a stone at him. Intended to throw a stone. How he knew that, anybody's guess. You can watch the video yourself and see if it appears that he intended to throw a stone. But that's what he says. The police, again, according to court documents, they take away his weapon, but they don't do anything else. They don't take him into the station. They don't investigate. So then that same day, Zechariah, who is, he's in the ICU at this point, really touch and go. His father and brother go to the local police station, which is, Israeli military police, and they try to file a complaint. And the police say the victim has to come in here and file a complaint himself, a criminal complaint. And they say, well, the victim, as you can see in this video here, which has 1 million views or something, was shot in the abdomen, is, potentially going to die in the hospital. They said, well, he has to come here himself and file the complaint. So they said, well, why don't you go to the hospital and take his testimony? They refused to do it. So again, according to the court documents, there's a 5-month investigation, and then no arrests are made. The case is closed. So then finally, once Zechariah is well enough to travel, this is just in July, so 9 months later, he and his lawyer actually do go, he and his attorney, who's an Israeli Jewish guy, go to the police station and file that criminal complaint. So allegedly the case has been reopened, but I haven't been able to get any details on if there's another investigation going on. I should say they also did get a restraining order on Nir, so he is for 180 days not allowed to go into At-Tuwani, and not allowed to carry a weapon. Now, why he should ever be allowed to go there is anybody's guess, but so that's where it stands today.
How indicative, lastly, of like, this is, one individual story, and people could say, well, there was a bureaucratic snafu. How indicative of is this, based upon your having spent a fairly considerable amount of time over the past 8 months there, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just put it this way. When I was traveling around with my fixer, we kept meeting these people who had been maimed by bullets, by IDF bullets or settler bullets, or they had lost a son or a father or somebody to the IDF. And I would ask them, what was your recourse after? Who did you call? What was the investigation? What was what were the proceedings like? And Zaid would sort of smile, my fixer, and then he would translate, and they would look at him like they didn't understand the question. Because just the concept of there actually being any recourse against this violence from soldiers and settlers is so absurd that people didn't really even understand the question that I was asking. So This is incredibly typical. His attorney said it himself. This happens all the time. It's happened since well before October 7th. It got worse in 2022 when, this new Israeli government came together and further emboldened this violence. But yeah, the only difference here is that this was caught on video. But otherwise, this happens every single day.
Jasper Nathaniel, writer of the Infinite Jaz newsletter on Substack, also a great follow on Instagram as well. And this piece in Zeteo, we'll put a link to it. The video is there, which has been, seen, like you say, at least 1 million times. You would think that would be sufficient evidence. But no, it gives you an indication of essentially what the value of Palestinian life is, as far as the Israeli occupying force considers it in the West Bank, where, again, remind you, there is no Hamas. Jasper, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
All right. All right, folks, we're going to head into the fun half. We've got some more fun clips of last night. AOC's speech really did blow the roof off in many respects. I mean, I think between her and Sean Fain, that was the most popular response of any of the politicians, as far as I saw.
Biden got
although
along
Biden,
with
I was
motion.
going to say, when Biden came out, it took literally 10 minutes before he was allowed to speak.
Hold your tongue. There's a hot Kathy Hochul clip that is lighting the internet on fire.
We will also play Kathy Hochul's appearance at the DNC. Completely barnstorming. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you get the fun half, and you get to IM us on the fun half. Some of you even love to spam us on the IMing of the fun half, but that's I guess
it's your prerogative.
Whatever, it's your prerogative. Also, don't forget, Just Coffee all this week. MR25 gets you 25% off of any of their blends or single origin coffees. It's a great time to check out your favorite there. And the AM Quickie, ladies and gentlemen, 3 days a week for free. You get top headlines in your email box. You can become a subscriber. That's 3 days a week. Emma.
On ESPN yesterday, we talked a little bit about the WNBA, what's up with that playoff race, but also some preseason headlines. Some good, like Caleb Williams, Bo Nix looking phenomenal. Some bad, like my New York Giants quarterback throwing a pick six out of the end zone off his return from injury. Jesus Christ. YouTube.com/ESPN show for that.
And Left Reckoning on Sunday, I talked with Olivier Jutel about venture capitalists and the concept of exit, both in terms of, say, I'm going to exit society by building a sea colony out in the middle of the Pacific, and also I'm going to exit this investment of, say, a fraudulent crypto coin by taking all of the money and running away, maybe to said, fake island off the Pacific. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Tonight, Elias Cepeda, who was protesting the DNC last night, will update us from Chicago, talk a little bit about that, and David Griscom's back from vacation. So tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern on Patreon, or on Left Reckoning YouTube.
All right, quick break. 646-257-3920 is the number. We'll be right back after this. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now, but I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
talking
Oh,
for a
wow.
second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Mac.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35.
35.
501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400. $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like
Yeah.
everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland. The number is 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. Turning on the phones at the moment. Before the cause, I'll bet you read this dumb message instead of all the carefully crafted ones I've written since I became a member. Love you, jerks. I'm sorry about that. Kamala Stowe the Waltz. I was there yesterday at the DNC protest. The vibe was great. Even a very small incident with the fence removal was so calm. I was there and not even noticed by most. How effective is the whole Republicans a weird attack line is working? I got to admit it. It did very few weird with how often artificial we love Joe came in. I don't get that. Does anybody else feel like that Biden love feel weird? The worming pilot. No, I don't know. Casey answer. What's the possible effects or your analysis of AOC's speech at the DNC? I mean, I personally was disappointed by what she had to say about the Gaza stuff, but the speech on a whole I thought was great. And, you know, she's clearly made a decision. I don't know if this was a year or two ago, but that she is not going to stay a congressperson. That she is interested in getting more power and doing something. And I imagine on some level, like, you know, Bernie has provided some type of template, whereas he is going to go in there. He's going to be the leftmost pole of the Democratic Party, but he's going to function within certain Democratic Party constraints. And you know, that's what really effective politicians do. I mean, Sanders has been, has walked that line and has been most effective ultimately in that role. He was able to build, a support in 2016 that I don't even think he was aware he had. I think he had resigned himself to be essentially a gadfly for his career. And then when he realized he had amassed a certain amount of power, he had slowly transitioned into someone who's going to attempt to impact the outcome of legislation. And I think he's been, incredibly effective in that way. You know, and I think that is the template that she's following.
Schumer's up. He got reelected in 2022, so that would be 2028, right? That would be when she would potentially run for Senate. I don't know what his plans are, right? But she probably is privy to those kinds of conversations in a way that we're not, of course. I mean,
Hard for me to imagine he's going to step down, but
he's
you know,
73. I mean,
Yeah,
and
well.
we know that that's like basically a teenager in Senate years. So
exactly.
But the fact that they kept panning to Kathy Hochul when AOC was giving her speech makes
Yeah,
me
but
think,
it's I don't know if the director of the DNC knows that.
I don't think they know it, but it just at the very least it got me thinking. At very least it got me thinking. I mean,
Yeah.
she's probably the weakest incumbent I could ever think of, and
I agree.
AOC could win in a primary. Like someone joked with me on Twitter, it was like, what numbers would AOC do in New York City from a level on a scale of 1 to Assad? Sorry if I'm butchering or not giving credit to the person who joked, but she would. I mean, people said like she'd have to do appeals upstate, of course, but just driving up the numbers in the city, that could be an effective primary challenge for Hochul, who got into this position like by default, and was actually picked for her weakness by Cuomo, which is interesting because Biden kind of did the same thing with Harris, and Harris is a better politician than Hochul, and Hochul is terrible at this. We'll get into that. We have it here, Sam, if you want to talk about it.
Okay, yeah, let me just read a couple IMs, then we'll get to that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Hey, my crew, did you see the video of RFK's VP saying they may drop out since they're taking more votes from Trump and are actually helping Harris? I have not seen that. I did see a story that they're running out of money, though.
Is that the VP that does the slime for adults?
Yeah. She's also the VP that apparently the campaign had to refund $1 million to her. She's been a big, I don't know. It's interesting.
Marxism, Leninism, Viglinism. Can you put in a good word with Sunset Lake Sebade, telling them their customers are interested in hash? Long time listener, first time subscriber. Tony 3. Hope this isn't spam, but why does your background remind me of David Pakman's? That's not funny. Golden Oyster Cult. We need new myths. Matt has surely seen Matewan, but we need more movies that tell stories of labor. We need a movie about the Nakba and the Battle of Algiers. We need to start infusing popular culture and myths that dominate currently. Let's watch Kathy Hochul, shall we? This was pretty impressive.
Donald Trump was born a New Yorker.
Oh my God.
But ended up a fraud, a philanderer, and a felon. He wasn't raised with the New York values that I know. He never had to worry about childcare costs or groceries or rent. He never had to worry about anything or anyone but himself. Donald Trump.
Dangerfield ass delivery.
What were they doing? Did they play like was there a video playing like a different like part of the stadium where everybody's paying attention? Like
No. That's how loud the chatter was.
Someone tweeted that she was speaking like Norm Macdonald. Like it was almost like anti-comedy. What she was doing.
Wait, it was like do we have a longer clip or did like
Bradley's gonna look for it.
Is she pulling down clips? I mean, that is spectacularly bad.
I mean, even Tim Walz is just like not even concerned about how he appears on camera, just chatting with his wife in the middle of Hochul's speech.
She acted. Sam recommended I go to Smith and Walensky, the Manhattan Steakhouse, when I had family in town a year ago. She reminded me of a waiter from Smith and Walensky, like the way they do bits and stuff.
They do bits?
Yeah, they'll make fun of you if you do medium well. They'll like make fun of you for it. Like
It's the place you take. It's the place you take your parents from who've rarely been to New York, where you want to give them like just the sort of an artificially enhanced New York experience.
Here's a little more.
He never had to worry about anything or anyone but himself. Trust me, America. If you think you're tired of Donald Trump, talk to a New Yorker.
There you go.
Okay.
Now that is that is the key when you are really hurting in a routine. The key is to try and get like anybody here drive here tonight.
She's literally pointing to the New York delegation, like, stand up, please save me.
Could use some help here.
Groundwork.
I also could she do the sing-song thing, like to make, because she probably got some tips saying don't come off shrieky. So I've got to do it like this.
She, I have to say that like, if you had not seen that cutaway to the crowd, you would think that they made her give her speech in like a hallway.
Yeah.
Like just like as people are walking by.
In intermission.
Go ahead, keep going. This is funny.
Think you're tired of Donald Trump? Talk to a New Yorker. We've had to deal with him for 78 long years. The fraud, the tax dodging, the sham university, the shady charities. We've seen him stiff contractors, rip off workers. He abuses women, brags about it, and then takes away their rights. And New Yorkers are sick of it. It's no wonder he has a fleet of former boss.
He did all that stuff in New York. Like maybe you should have done something about it before he became everyone's problem.
God, it really has the energy of like a stand-up at a nursing home. You can hear the aides taking away the plates and the cutlery as she's speaking.
When Norm Macdonald did Bob Saget's roast, one of his biggest jokes was like, "This man is for the birds, ladies and gentlemen." Like just like truly like absolute droll kind of comedy. It just literally sounds like Norm Macdonald could have done this act.
Right.
He could have read the speech and it would have been more engaging.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, really, honestly, very impressive.
So long story short, AOC could totally primary
I might
win.
primary.
Yes, man. Yes.
All right, let's play the this clip of AOC. This one I really liked, where she went in hard about Donald Trump and union. This was, I mean, her speech was very well received.
Mm-hmm.
Let's check it out.
In Kamala Harris, I see a leader who understands. I see a leader with a real commitment to a better future for working families. And Chicago, we have to help her win. Because we know that Donald Trump would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets and greasing the palms of his Wall Street friends. And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life. The truth is, Don, you cannot love this country if you only fight for the wealthy and big business. To love this country is to fight for its people, all people, working people, everyday Americans like bartenders and factory workers and fast food cashiers who punch a clock and are on their feet all day in some of the toughest jobs out there. You know, ever since I got elected, Republicans have attacked me by saying that I should go back to bartending. But let me tell you, I'm happy to any day of the week because there is nothing wrong with working for a living.
I mean, that is, I mean, I imagine she said that over the years, but that really puts them in a jam for their attempt to appeal to working people, where they criticize her for being a working person.
Well, that's what I like about this campaign too, or where we're at, I guess, with the Democratic Party on that front, which is demystifying labor as like, you know, not this imagined person that the Republicans have tried to conjure, or that like the media is honestly helped by going to diners to talk about working class white people, and that being the only image of in the national imagination that I think the media has put to the forefront of who a worker is. Workers are all different races. Workers are all different genders. You know, AOC was a bartender and she didn't have health insurance, and that was a big part of what was the impetus for her to run. And so she also followed Sean Fain. So that's like thematic consistency that I appreciated. That was the part of her speech that I thought, like, focusing on unions too, and Trump as a union buster, following Fain, that's a strong compliment.
Let's play this clip too from Joe Biden. I mean, the most impressive thing I have to say about Biden was sort of like the way that the crowd greeted him. I mean, it literally went on for like 8 minutes. But
do you want to take a look at that, Sam? Or
yeah, let's just play that for a moment. But then I want to get to the other part, which I thought was sort of like I really appreciated, and it was interesting that they included this. But go ahead. And just keep in mind, this is happening at like midnight. Like, I don't know, like 11:30
Eastern, 10:30 in Chicago. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
That went on for like 5 or 7 minutes. I mean, largely people are just so grateful that he did ultimately, you know, step aside. I mean, I think there's a lot of things, again, you know, we've talked about foreign policy aside, it's been an extraordinary change in the mainstream Democratic disposition on what government's supposed to provide, what our economy can look like. And this just, it's not much of it's not a big thing, but it was interesting where Biden was talking about how his economic policies have changed the country, but he makes a point to basically say that he perceives his economic policy to have been an ideological break with other Democrats, which I thought was really interesting because we haven't heard that acknowledgement from him in the past, that there was a self-conscious break with the neoliberal policies that Bill Clinton really embraced. And frankly, Barack Obama did too. Here is Biden.
We fundamentally transformed how our economy grows, from the middle out and the bottom up instead of the top down. You know, my dad used to say there wasn't a whole hell of a lot to drop down on my kitchen table at the end of the month. I come from a basic middle-class family, 3-bedroom house, 4 kids, a grandpop living with us, decent neighborhood, but never a penny to spare. And look, that top-down notion never worked. A lot of Democrats didn't think it worked, but thought it worked, but it doesn't. And when we did all that, what we've done, everybody can do well. Everybody.
All right, I mean, that's, look.
Revisionist history on his own record, but as president, it was a shift, which was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he may have been talking about himself, for all we know, when he said there was a lot of Democrats who thought, but that top down is trickle down economics, and it was, obviously it was a Ronald Reagan, sort of espoused by Ronald Reagan, and his, one of with Art Laffer, one of his top sort of economic advisors, who had this notion that the more money we give to rich people, and the more money we allow rich people to keep through their exploitation of labor and resources that the government provides, then they'll go and spend it, and it will literally trickle down, like a golden shower, almost dropping down on people. And in fact, it doesn't turn out to be the case. The famous saying is that a rich man buys one loaf of bread a day, just like anybody else. And so, but if you give more people the opportunity to buy one loaf of bread, you're going to be selling more loaves of bread. That's basically the bottom line.
It's interesting. I mean, I know this is kind of palace intrigue stuff, right? We were joking about I maybe get more enjoyment about that out of that than some, like Nancy Pelosi and is kind of admitting she forced Biden out of the race, and there were a lot of rumblings that there were concerns, and I don't know how authentic this was, but I think there were people that were trying to do some blitz primary to get their kind of Democrat in as the nominee. There were efforts to do that, and I always said that this can be solved if Biden drops out and just endorses Kamala Harris because his delegates are pledged to him. And then that's exactly really, what happened, and it was avoided altogether. And
I should say Pelosi in an interview conceded that's what ended her attempt to have the big thing, was that they didn't know. In her conversation with Ezra Klein, she said, we didn't know that he was going to drop out on that Sunday. And then by the time that we all sort of like realized what was going on, he had already endorsed Harris. And so we didn't have the opportunity to do the crazy primary they thought they were going to do.
Which is, I think Biden's legacy will be genocide for the most part. And so I struggle with giving him praise specifically at this moment. But I will say that that was a good move on his part to close the door on some of those vultures who may have been wanting to return to those kinds of politics. And the palace intrigue of that is that he apparently blames Pelosi and Obama for forcing him out, but not Harris, who he says was not, stuck with him the entire time, which is why I do feel there's some shrewdness on her part, because this was the one guy that could propel her to the top of the ticket. If she stays close to him during this turbulent period and looks loyal, he'd be more inclined to endorse her, and that's what happened. And so with all the efforts to Shapiro wanted to be in this blitz primary, those kinds of folks that the Obama world was pushing, who have more of that neoliberal bent. It's a good part of Biden's legacy that he maybe foreclosed that possibility and probably got some assurances from Harris. Now that we're seeing a lot of Brian Deese and some of his other economic people that are seemingly kind of transitioning to her campaign as well. He made it so that his legacy could continue, at least in this area on economic policy. Fingers crossed, there's still a long ways to go, but probably did get a sense that Harris could further that. And the indications that she's keeping some of those better economic people on board make me hopeful on that front. So that's where I'll give Biden credit.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 726 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam and Emma. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. It's great to hear from you. Didn't recognize the 726. You got a new phone.
Yeah. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Okay.
Why'd you get a new
All right,
phone? Do you use a
yeah,
different phone on the leather hack? Is this a burner? Is this a burner phone for your mistress, the Majority Report?
No, because I'm on, they can see me on the Letter Hack show, so there's no phone involved. But
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So we're 77 days away from Election Day, and I want to share where we stand in the snapshot in time. I want to say clearly that I want Harris to win. I hope she gets a big bump coming out of the convention. And when voters who aren't political mavens start tuning in after Labor Day, I hope they support her. I also want to be objective about where we stand right now. The numbers I cite are my own polling averages in 7 swing states that will determine who wins the presidency. Other top aggregators' numbers are at the most off by 2 or 3 points, though most of the time they're within a point in polling averages. I'll start with the states that have Harris winning and her leads. Wisconsin, she's up by 3.4. Michigan 2.9, Pennsylvania 1.9, Arizona 0.5, Nevada 0.2. North Carolina, with its 16 electoral votes, is even. In Georgia, Trump leads by 1.6. There's also a Roanoke College poll that came out today that only has Harris up by 3. In Virginia, which is surprising because Tim Kaine is up by 11 in the same poll. If Harris wins all of the states where she has a current polling lead, she will win with 288 electoral votes. A poll by the highly biased Republican pollster Remington Research Group has Harris up by 8 points in Nebraska's 2nd District. Polling from the presidential elections in 2008 and 2012 were incredibly accurate. But as more people purchase smartphones and stop using landlines, it's been harder to conduct polls, and people who follow elections realize that polling in the formerly blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin were off in 2016, and that shocked everyone. In 2020, Biden also had polling leads in the formerly blue wall states, and it was much closer than people expected. Presidential year elections are much harder to predict than midterm elections because it's hard to know how many low propensity voters are going to turn out for each side. Generally, I still think that polling is very accurate. Top forecasters get 95% of their picks right, and even people who don't follow politics closely but have a rudimentary level of understanding which states are red, blue, and purple can predict 90% of the races, especially if they read top forecasters' picks. I've seen some data recently that say the average of polling miss is 4 to 5 points, but that's deceptive because most races are blowouts, and it doesn't matter if a candidate wins by 15, 20, or 25 points. Proper way to measure accuracy is to look at swing state races or close elections and measure those predictions. Then those percentages will drastically go down and be more accurate. Many partisan Democrats, including myself, are concerned that there will be a polling era in the formerly blue wall states, which is the main path for a Harris victory at this point. Remember that Trump picked up 3 electoral votes in the reallocation from the census that could be reduced to 2 if Harris wins North Carolina. If Trump can win Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona, but loses the formerly blue wall states, it will come down to Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which Biden won by 6.4 in 2020. But Republican Congressman Don Bacon has held his seat since 2016. If there's a 269-269 tie, which would happen if Harris holds the blue wall states but loses Nebraska's 2nd district, the newly elected House would determine who wins each state, and that's based on a single vote based on the majority of votes of House members in that state. In that vote, based on my projections, Republicans would win 27 states, Democrats would win 22, and Minnesota would be tied. Considering the small margins that Harris leads by, another concern are our faithless electors. In 2016,
all right, hold on, John. Let me stop. Let's hold some of the faithless electors thing. You know, we still got several weeks here. All right, so we don't need to we'll get into that. But let me just ask you this one question, and then I anticipate hopefully that you'll be calling in every Tuesday to give us sort of a update as to where we are. But do you think when you see that Virginia thing, do you think, and presumably they would answer, don't know, but I am convinced there is still a significant portion, not huge, but significant because margins are going to be so thin in this election, a significant portion of people who are not aware that Harris is running yet.
I don't know about that. The poll, said that Harris was running. I mean, there was polls before that had her running, even before she jumped in. Yeah, I mean, I think people aren't paying attention, but I also think that Virginia, was the main state that, out of all the states where Biden won by fairly large margins in 2020, that had pretty bad results in Biden-Trump matchups. The other ones were Minnesota and New Hampshire, but those have kind of resorted to where Harris is up by about 6 points in polling averages in both of those states. And so, yeah, I mean, it was surprising, but I mean, I still think she'll win Virginia. But it's just surprising that that's essentially a toss-up state, and hopefully we'll see more polling.
Let me rephrase the question. Do you think that there is, there's always traditionally a bump after the convention, although to be fair, the bump went the wrong direction for Trump and Vance after their convention. Do you think that there's actually a potential for a greater bump? Because I think that there is a cohort of people out there who have just not engaged in this race and are just not necessarily aware of the fact that Harris is running, or, this has been a very, very short lead time for a candidate to be the nominee. And I just got to imagine that there's some percentage out there, I don't know if it's 1 or 2% or whatever, who are just not aware that she's the candidate.
Yeah, I think they're aware that she's the candidate, but I just don't think they started tuning in enough. So in other words, if you look at just recently, Harris has taken over, by less than a point in Arizona and Nevada. And all the polls that are the strongest for her are all recent polls. The ones that are, where Trump is doing well is when she first got into the race or she first announced. And so she has momentum in just about every race in swing states, except for probably Georgia, and it's still it's still a toss-up race at 1.6. Now, Georgia has had a lot of things going on as a ProPublica report to where they're trying to, laws that were changed to make it discretionary, whether they can actually certify the elections.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty bizarre to see that happening. And Cleta Mitchell, that was just reported on Sunday, the person who was on the call with Trump, with Raffensperger, that was so popular or so famous about changing the votes. she's leading that effort. And so, yeah, that's pretty bizarre that's going on. Pretty awful, from a from a democracy point of view.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they are tuning in. They will be tuning in. There's always the question mark of how many people are going to turn out, because I mean, I was not expecting 81 million votes, or over 81 million votes for Biden, over 74 million votes for Trump in 2020. I mean, the numbers were just outrageous. 2 out of every 3 eligible voters did vote in 2020, which is, much higher than any other election, since the 19th Amendment was put into place. They gave women the right to vote. The highest before that was the election of 1900. And so yeah, I mean, I just, that's another question mark, is how
Right.
many people are going to turn out.
Right.
And I mean, that remains to be seen, because
That's
I
the
have
biggest
seen some,
question, in my opinion. But all right, John,
Right.
appreciate you calling in. We'll talk to you again soon. And people
All
can
right.
check
All
you
right,
out
take
on the
care.
Letter Hack Show tonight.
I'm not going to be on the Letter Hack Show tonight.
Oh.
I mean, I'm not. No. Live primary squad members, all that's over with. I will
All
probably
right.
be on in about 3 or 4 weeks, but I'll tell people on the call when I
right.
call into this show about it at that point.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, take care. All right.
Look, we got a little drama apparently happening on the.
Trouble in Paradise.
Yeah, I guess so. Not so easy. The podcast game's not so easy. People seem to think it is. Can't just jump
A lot
right
of
in.
drama behind the scenes.
Can't just jump right in, folks.
John comes crawling back to his ex, huh?
Trump apparently had an economic speech in Pennsylvania. Says 502 Drew. You got to play some clips from that speech because he's losing it. We don't have any of those clips, do you?
I think it's happening. We do have a clip of him being interviewed about his assassination attempt, I think, but like,
The what?
is the Washington Post going to write an op-ed about Trump's lack of substance in his economic policies, or we're just going to pretend that?
Can you imagine an opinion piece in the Washington Post? Trump's opponents call him a fascist. Maybe he should stop doing fascist things, instead of like that Catherine Rampell thing. It's so stupid. This is a funny clip. Apparently, Charlie Kirk was credentialed. He was doing coverage of the DNC. And the president of the Young Democrats of Georgia, a guy named Parker Short, approached him. And this exchange is hilarious. I mean, it is. I'll tell you what I find amazing about this is that despite all the evidence of the effectiveness of Charlie Kirk's retort at the end of this, and you got to stay for the end of it, despite all the evidence that this is not an effective argument or statement or question or whatever for people who are not inside your bubble, your right-wing bubble, Kirk, he knows where he's at. Like he's not an idiot, but he is suffering from, I think, being locked in a bubble so firmly locked within that bubble, he's not even aware of it when he steps out of it.
Because we have a Republican governor and a Republican Secretary of State in the state of Georgia.
What's your name? You said Parker?
My name's Parker. We have a Republican governor and a Republican Secretary of State in Georgia that approved our elections, and Donald Trump said that wasn't constitutional.
relax.
Donald Trump tried to undermine our Constitution.
You're at 10. I just walked in. I'm here to just learn.
Hey, you're an anti-patriotic, anti-constitutional person crashing our party
So let me
because
ask you
you
one
tried
question.
to
I got
stop our
one question.
democracy.
I got one question.
Donald Trump called the
Can I ask you
Secretary
one
of State of
question?
Georgia and told him to find him some votes.
What is a woman?
Oh my God. That is so fucking weird, y'all. Maybe you should meet one.
I'm married to one.
Because we have a
There you go.
I'm married to one.
But the best part is like what's your response to Donald Trump being caught on tape, essentially like fishing for more votes? What's a woman? I mean, it's just like the dude, they are just locked in a bubble. I mean, listen, I have no illusions as to who, is in our audience. We'll occasionally get libertarians. We'll have some disagreement about Israel, Gaza. We'll have, every now and then somebody from Rumble will call in. But if I walk into the Republican National Convention, I'm going to anticipate talking to people who don't agree with what I agree with. And I'm going to approach them with the most effective argument I have. And Charlie Kirk deploys What's a Woman? It's just bizarro. And the kid was right. He's like, so effing weird.
Right. And so that kid's the president of Young Democrats in Georgia. It's just fascinating because this is supposedly the target demographic of Charlie Kirk's entire operation of Turning Points USA for the past decade or however long it's been in operation. He's supposed to be the whisperer for the college students. And that, I don't know how old that guy is, but he's probably around that age. Doesn't seem to be having a good effect here on that front.
I mean, because they can't get through the Olympics without going through a crisis about what is a woman themselves.
I know it. I know it.
All they have is just like, mockery. It's so negative and nasty, and I think it just wears thin when there's nothing else there. Like Trump's mockery in 2016 had also just like his anti-establishment and like the racism behind it and the immigration stuff. And then he also was saying things like, I'm going to give everybody health care. And now it's just like, I want to make fun of Doug Emhoff's daughter and like her appearance. Like, let's make fun of Tim Walz for having a little bit of a belly or something like that. And what kind of politics is that when there's nothing else behind it except
that's the
Trump
thing,
worship? Yeah.
I mean, it's a fun thing to do. To make fun of, I enjoyed, there was no better moment for me in the RNC than when Donald Trump pretended like Tiffany did not exist and he turned away, but he's throwing kisses at Hulk Hogan.
Right.
But we can also talk about their policies. Like the problem with them is that they don't have that. Like, because Trump has made and the Republican Party, for that matter, has made the entire party about Trump worship. And so, attacking him as a person has some efficacy. People, are excited about Harris and Walz, but I mean, it's not, like literally she was just a late replacement for Biden and her numbers go up. And it wasn't because people were like, we need Harris. It's like, we want Democratic policies.
Right.
And she's the person now who's going to embody that.
It's more about the agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is just, how can you combat that? A cult of personality without an agenda, well, except Project 2025, but in terms of what he's advertising, or, a person at the top of the ticket who a broad swath of the party think is serviceable for the moment, and an agenda that's really popular. And they're leaning into selling that agenda. And she's also not doing, and we pointed this out because Hillary Clinton's speech I just couldn't stand. Hillary just kept over and over talking about herself or the history and connecting her candidacy to Harris's candidacy and to women of the past. And it's like, Harris doesn't even mention her gender or race for the most part. She just lets the Republicans freak out about it. And she focuses more on the policy of it, which is way better than making it about me, me, me. Trump's doing that. Hillary did that. Happy to see his campaign diverge from that.
I'm with Bussy director Sam Wishcasting Rumble callers. Me too, bud.
Do you think the way that they deploy that "what is a woman" thing is the way they would have said, "Oh, you like black people," without saying the word "black people" about 40 years ago?
Yeah, they would. It's their way of saying, like it's their more intellectual way of saying "and lover."
Exactly.
Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Like it just, for them, it just supposedly ends the conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, got you. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 818. 818. Back into the queue. 818. Hope it was your fault, not ours. Calling from a 302 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, barely.
Oh, hold on. Let me turn off my headphones.
Okay.
Hello, this is Lucas calling from Delaware.
Lucas from Delaware. What a difference.
You have no idea how much better you sound now.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Oh, so I'll just jump right into it.
Okay.
I was watching Sam's interview a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about Lena Khan and how she's kind of in limbo right now, September. And my question was, is there any like campaign that you guys know of, or any way to like pressure Biden into appointing her again in September? That way Kamala doesn't have to make that decision with the whole LinkedIn donor.
I don't know what the leverage would be on Biden, but I do think that there is value in, like, you know, if there was a campaign like there was for RBG, you know, to sort of make Lena Khan some type of like, you know, popular meme, or, you know, some type of like cultural figure, that would certainly help. But I don't know what the leverage we have with Biden is right now, to be honest with you. You know, he's wrapping up. He just had his big swan song last night. You know, he's going to do what Biden's going to do at this point. He very well himself. Look, he appointed Lena Khan. It may be part of his agenda that I'm going to make sure that she stays here. And I would imagine, you know, someone like Elizabeth Warren right now is working that angle as we speak. But I think the more sort of like Lena Khan memes that are out there, positive ones, it's certainly not going to hurt.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, whether or not the Senate would approve is a whole nother story too. I would imagine if Kamala or Harris does make the decision to keep her on, that their Senate majority, if they get it, would be a slightly more agreeable one.
Yeah, I would imagine that too. But it's worth calling your senator and just, you know, saying, I want Lena Khan for another, you know, who knows?
Oh, I plan to.
All right. Well, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah, left is best. Have a good one.
That's great. Don't use those headset. Use whatever the last way that you were talking to us was, because it's much better. Calling from a 956 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Who's this?
Oh, perfect. Oh, my name is Drew. I'm from Wisconsin. I got a 956 area code, but I used to live in Texas.
All right.
But my name is Drew. I'm a student, and I'm non-binary. And I was kind of wondering, with like the last kind of, 4 years with Biden not really doing a whole lot for like trans and non-binary youth, do you think that, we're going to see anything better under Harris?
I'm not sure about your characterization. They just put out a Title IX directive a couple of months ago. Now, it was just stopped by the Supreme Court. But it was an attempt to increase protections for LGBTQ plus kids, students. So I'm not sure, specifically what you're looking for, but I would imagine Harris is going to be, just in terms of age and dispositionally, probably just, more comfortable navigating those waters. Yeah,
she was good
imagine.
on in California, like what was that, Prop 8? That was the anti Sam. Am I remembering the name of that correctly?
Yeah, the hate. They called it the hate Proposition Hate or something.
Ban same-sex marriage.
Yeah, she's featured actually in the documentary about that, of like, personally making the call to restart gay marriages to some of these. I I'm speaking on it in a way that I need to look more into it, but I think there's an understanding with her that she's been pro LGBTQ throughout her career in California. Biden preempted Obama on gay marriage, if people recall, on the Ellen show, but Biden was also somebody who was in favor of don't ask, don't tell, and for most of his career, did not, of course, put like queer people, LGBTQ people at the front of his agenda. So just generationally, and then also in terms of record, she's better.
That's hopeful, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm not going to take too much of y'all's time or nothing, but I finally subscribed to y'all. I've been watching you guys for a few years now. Just want to thank you guys for all you do and appreciate it. Less is best. Love you guys.
Appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll give you one.
Yeah. Bye.
Unsolicited.
Take care.
Appreciate the call. Kowalski from Nebraska reminds us Tim Walz was the faculty sponsor for the Gay Straight Alliance when he was a teacher football coach. So I think we have LGBTQ allies on the ticket. I mean, this was in the 90s too.
Yes.
Where I can tell you it was, I think it's sometimes hard for people who listen to this program. Take it from me as an old guy. The difference between 90s, but certainly, the late 80s and now is just, night and day. And for a football coach to have done that in the 90s, this was not a slam dunk.
I think the Democrats can be good on these issues when they're not scared away from it. Hillary Clinton at the State Department allowed a rule change so people could change their gender on their passports. She didn't want to run on that later because it became more of an acute issue the Republicans are run on. But yeah, I would think that a standard Democrat would be better than Joe Biden typically.
There was I don't know if you saw this, and I think Emma, I think you had mentioned it, or maybe it was an IMer, but there was a report that I can't remember his name, but he's a longtime Democratic consultant who was brought in to give his advice to Kamala Harris. He's about 71. My understanding is that he's been fairly good. But he came in and basically said, like, don't do this weird thing. It comes off as too mean. It's too negative. There was one other point I can't remember off the top of my head, but it really was indicative of what we've been saying on this program for quite some time, is that people, age is a proxy for this on some level, but it's also like when people entered into politics, in many respects, your understanding of politics is frozen there. I mean, just as an example, my ability to ingest new music is limited. I still, if it's something from the late 80s or the early 90s, or it sounds like something that could have been from the late 80s or the early 90s, that's basically what I'll listen to for the most part. And there is an analogy made to politics. This isn't always the case. But I think as, all of you people grow older, you'll find that like you get stuck in there's some things you get into a little rut, and then 30 years go by and you go like, oh, geez, I still do that. And I mean, it's the case with my clothes too, on some level. But the point being that, just a different generation has a completely different baseline on these things and are not as afraid, particularly in terms of like this generation of people who are starting to fill our politics, are not backing away from positions that they believe in, for efficacy, particularly in this sort of like cultural war front. So let's go to, let's do number 17. This is the Groundwork Collaborative did some studies, if I remember correctly, that showed a huge percentage of our inflation was actually a function of corporations just deciding they had the ability to raise the prices for an extended period of time in the wake of COVID. Now, some people could argue, well, the only reason why they were able to do this is because people had more money. They had to increase their savings because of government support, which I suppose that's possible. But were there no COVID, I don't think people would be so readily acceptable of these sudden increase in prices, right? Like, I mean, everybody's going, it's COVID, it's an emergency. So yes, but if you try to do those prices, even if people have that kind of money, without any sort of like international once in a lifetime event to justify it, it's going to be much harder to sell to people about it. I would also add that to a certain extent, our entire conversation about inflation is completely blinkered, because if you are a working person, if you are, so-called middle class, whatever it is, if you're in the 99%, you don't care in a vacuum about the price of anything. You care about the price of something relative to how much money you make and have. It is a dynamic. And to bring down inflation, but also bring down wages and depress wages and employment. And so this dynamic remains, whether it's up here or up here. That only benefits the people who are untethered from their wages going down.
Yes.
And the employment numbers in the capitalist class, who are doing the hiring, because they're still up here. So if prices come down and wages come down here, they're still up here, and you get even greater wealth and inequality. So just keep that in mind. Our conversation about inflation is really framed and structured by a certain class in this country of extremely wealthy people who have, it is problematic for them, particularly like, financiers and whatnot, and those banks. There's a lot of 3% mortgages out there. There's a lot of 2%,
right,
car loans that the people who extended those loans 4 or 5 years ago are a little bit pissed that they're having to basically, there's much less return than you could get just by putting the money in some online bank.
Right.
All right. Let's play this clip. This is number 17. Sorry.
Yeah, this is a conversation they had on CNBC. And the question's first posed to a Trump Heritage Foundation guy.
Oh,
and
Steve Moore is he is just insufferable. And he's
he'll be insufferable in this clip for sure. And then it's a great response here from someone from the Groundwork Collaborative named Lindsay Owens.
Way of where it's not a bad policy to institute price controls when there's something allowing companies to game the system.
Yeah, and what's especially dangerous about the idea is she's talking about grocery stores and 7-Elevens. I mean, if you actually have, you'll put grocery stores out of business. As you know, they only have 2 or 3% margins. So you put price controls, they'll go out of business. And people will actually have, not have access to food, which is a dangerous situation. The question, of course, is why they would endorse something so idiotic.
Well, and I think it sells, I think. Let me get to Lindsay. And that's what everybody's telling me today, is that people want something done. People want something done. And this look. Hold on. Let me get to Lindsay. Lindsay, is that there's something to that? That it looks like they're taking some action and they're not really serious about taking it too far with price controls?
Look, I listened to the vice president's speech on Friday, and what I heard is someone who's laser focused on lowering costs for American families, particularly the costs that matter most, the cost of a roof over your head and food on the table. And she laid out a couple of proposals. The first thing she said she was going to do is crack down on price fixing by companies like RealPage. This is the data software company that lets corporate landlords collude on rent prices. She said they're not going to be able to do that anymore under my administration. The second thing she said is she's going to do a new federal price gouging ban on food and grocery. This is not price controls. 40 states have price gouging laws on the books. These are red states, these are blue states. This is Idaho, this is Texas, this is Louisiana. Donald Trump did price gouging laws. He used the executive authority he had under the Defense Production Act to crack down on price gouging of medical supplies during the pandemic. So this is a common sense set of policies. We need a new ban at the federal level on the books. But the reason that she's proposing something like this is because it works. She successfully prosecuted cheaters after wildfires in California. We just saw Cal-Maine, the nation's largest egg producer, was convicted at a jury trial of price gouging. Bird flu is a great example. It is ridiculous if your business model is to wait around for the bird flu and really gouge consumers to rake in record profits. By the way, this isn't about bringing supply back online. At the jury trial, what we found out about Cal-Maine is that they were fanning the flames of this supply shortage, exacerbating it. They were culling the flock. They were exporting the eggs to keep the shortage going here at home in the United States. So I think Harris is exactly right to be taking this on. And by the way, if you're a company who relies on ripping off consumers, you want to be taking a close look at your business model, because this really doesn't speak well of you.
It's exactly right. And just to remind people of this dynamic, inflation during COVID, because there were issues with the supply chain primarily. This was the driver. There were work stoppages. There was difficulty shipping goods because people were dying. People were isolating. Like, it got disrupted. Prices went up 100%. That's what happened. But then gradually, as work returned, the supply chain process began to return to normal. Prices stayed high. And in the final quarter of last year, corporations reported record profits. Now, if this inflation is so naturally occurring, that would not make any sense. The math is not mathing. And what they're upset about is that, particularly these meat producers, just 4 companies now control, this was Robert Reich a few months ago, processing of 80% of beef, nearly 70% of pork, almost 60% of poultry. They have outsized power in the marketplace where they can gouge and basically use their power to make record profits in this period, and then they'll just blame inflation and the Democrat in office because they're also concerned about the antitrust angle. There needs to be a two-pronged approach on this front. Federalizing these price gouging laws, and there's different states have, it ranges from civil to criminal penalties on when they punish corporations or companies within their state for, say, taking advantage of a natural disaster in X state, right? They can't do that. That's on the books in, as she said, nearly 40 states out of 50 in this country. So Harris is proposing to federalize that, and then also hopefully pressure needs to continue to be applied to retain Lena Khan so you can get at it from the other angle of antitrust, of breaking up this monopolistic power. And that's what's so threatening to, the other guest on that panel.
And just one more word about the way the inflation conversation has gone, because from the beginning, it was clear that this was a supply chain, a production problem, not a demand problem. It was a supply problem, not an overheated demand. Our economy essentially had the capacity, but not the ability in that moment, because you wake up one day and every container that you used to rely on is in places it's never been before. And instead of costing $3,000 to ship, a container to ship whatever it is you're shipping from wherever, it's costing $11,000 or $20,000. And like you say, there are shutdowns that are happening in China. There's a shortage of microchips, and so you get cars backed up. But the story of inflation went from, well, inputs are too high, that's why we're keeping the prices up. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of shifted into, well, there's too much money sloshing around. Demand is overheated. But there was no evidence of demand overheated. There was arguably people had a little more savings, but the bottom line is this was price gouging, and the concentration that Emma's talking about, you could see it in the context. I just remember the story that, I'd gone to get a new inner tube for my bike at a local bike shop in Brooklyn. And the guy's like, I can't get these. And just as an experiment, because like my supplier's saying like they don't have any, but just as an experiment, I went on to Amazon. They had them on Amazon, and I just put in there 95. If I could buy 95 of these from Amazon just to see. And he said I could. And I realized, like, I went back to my supplier and they said, Amazon's basically telling us like, we've got to sell it all to them or they're going to cut us off. And that's the type of market concentration where you see the problematic. And then all of a sudden, Amazon's off to the races. Like, there's a pandemic, there's a shortage of these things, which they created. We can jack up the price. And this is just price gouging. This is not a question of people having more money in their pocket to buy, an inner tube. It's the way that our market is, completely distorted and concentrated market power and economic power. And so,
and it's interesting you bring up Jeff Bezos and Amazon because that was where the Washington Post editorial board called that proposal that was laid out there quite, I think, succinctly by Lindsay Owens is they called it a gimmick when, it's quite clear that there's a factual basis behind it. And, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. I don't think it's that direct, but just something to note. And they're also pissed because from the antitrust perspective, the Biden administration has targeted Kroger. They were trying to merge with Albertsons to do, a larger grocery chain. And that's the other end of like why particularly the food and grocer interest groups are so angry and pissed off. And then, she mentioned there as well that other piece of what Harris is proposing as it relates to housing. There are some things that I think it's a mixed bag, but mostly good of what she's proposed on housing. I still don't love like privileging home ownership as a means for economic stability, but like in terms of maybe cracking down on these corporate landlords, that's also what they did. These algorithms that these corporations bought up all these buildings and then used algorithms to essentially jack up rents in so many of these units throughout the rest of the country.
That's RealPage. That's what Owens were talking about. RealPage going after and suing them criminally.
Which they should. So, this is just common sense stuff. And the idea that people are calling this not substantive when the media is calling it not substantive, when Donald Trump is not proposing dick, it's nothing. He's going out there and just talking about how Harris, maybe it is very big. But he's going out there and just posing with Folgers coffee and then ranting about Harris not really being black. It's like, what are we doing here?
This I also like, just from a rhetorical standpoint. We have never, part of like, I think the response that you're talking about in terms of like the press and the way that they're addressing her economic proposals. And we should say like, from what we know, at least in the speeches, and, we'll be playing this David Dayen interview tomorrow. And he said that during her speeches, she's still bringing up the 5% rent control, national
rent increase
cap.
Right. That's good.
Here is Harris answering questions to the press, and this is a marked change. I know this is going to seem sort of subtle to people, but this is a marked change from where we were 10, 15 years ago, when the best way to get a Democrat to stop talking about policies that would support people would be to pretend like there was some type of like deficit hawkery and that they needed to justify these things, which was all just garbage. It was all BS anyways. But here is Harris with a decidedly different rhetorical approach to this age-old question that we get from the Beltway press.
Some economic policies last week. Yeah. Can you explain how you're going to pay for those? And can you give us a sense of what other policies you want to unveil going forward?
Sure. Well, I mean, you just look at it in terms of what we are talking about, for example, around children and the child tax credit and extending the EITC. That it's at $6,000 for the first year of a child's life. The return on that investment in terms of what that will do and what it will pay for will be tremendous. We've seen it when we did it the first year of our administration. We reduced child poverty by over 50%. So that's a lot of the work. And then what we're doing in terms of the tax credits, we know that there's a great return on investment. When we increase home ownership in America, what that means in terms of increasing the tax base, not to mention property tax base, what that does to fund schools, again, return on investment. I think it's a mistake for any person who talks about public policy to not critically evaluate how you measure the return on investment. When you are strengthening neighborhoods, strengthening communities, and in particular the economy of those communities, and investing in a broad-based economy, everybody benefits, and it pays for itself in that way. Madam Vice President.
Well,
That's
different
awesome.
From, the austerity politics
Totally.
of
And the media and
Democrats.
everyone understands this when it's time to forgive, say, the funds given to businesses during the COVID pandemic. It's like, oh yeah, they didn't pay that back because it's just something we wanted to do.
Or we're going to give $20 billion to Israel to fight a war. Where was
What's
the
the
one
ROI
question of
there?
like, how are we going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Where are the where are the cuts associated with that? Where, it's the question is deployed very strategically by the right in this country. And finally, honestly, it's the first time I've ever seen a candidate running for certainly for like national office, like a Democrat running for national office, but even,
in the general. Yeah.
In a general election. I mean, Bernie Sanders would answer this way. But to see Harris basically say, I'm not going to take the bait. We're investing in a better society. That's the payoff. I mean, that's how we pay for it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Bonk.
Fart Wayne, we reduced child poverty by 40% and then we brought it right back, baby. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe Manchin.
We did.
Would be an interesting dynamic. Would you rather have a 51 or 52 seat majority with Sinema and Manchin, or a 50 seat majority with none of those, with like maybe Tester being the most conservative for Harris?
It sort of depends on there was like back in the days where like Joe Lieberman was around and Evan Bayh. I mean, there was like literally half a dozen, maybe a dozen of these guys.
Obama had 60 for a little bit.
Yes.
He had 60 for it was a shorter period of time than people think.
Yeah.
It was like closer to like 14 months maybe. Because Franken didn't get seated until around this time after the election. Maybe it was July and then Kennedy died on the other end. So it was not even a full 2 years. But that being said, there was the idea was that like, regardless of where you put the filibuster, like they reduced the filibuster, from 66 to 60, I think during that era, regardless of where you put the filibuster, a guy like Lieberman is going to put himself as the 59th or 60th vote.
Mm-hmm.
They're always going to move there so that they get that sort of like, and that's what Manchin has done, right? I mean, it took him a while to figure out how he would get there. And Sinema did it because she had the cover of Manchin. It's hard to know who has that disposition until they have the opportunity to be that person. It could be Fetterman. It could, we could see Fetterman doing that kind of thing.
Although the child tax, like the fact that the even JD Vance is disingenuously saying he'll do $5,000. That's interesting, right? I mean, look, then partisanship, if she gets elected, it's all out the window, but maybe just means there's something a little bit different. Not saying you bring Republicans on board, but maybe it means something a little different for frontline Democrats.
For years, coming from Connecticut, supported a 55-year-old or a Medicare buy-in, or dropping it to 55. I can't remember what it was. And it makes sense if you're supporting the interests of the health insurance industry, right? Because if we can offload, as the insurance company, offload people aged 55 to 65 onto the government, onto Medicare, our risk pool now has improved. So we could charge the same amount of money. Our risk pool is better, and we still have a cohort of people who are the least likely to, or less likely to, need medical care, and we make more money. And Lieberman was for this. And then when it came up in the negotiations of the ACA, he turned against it just because he wanted to be the guy that everybody had to come to. I mean, he was that like, I remember at the time thinking like, how is it possible that someone's just completely insane ego and feelings of like, so mad that he was rejected by Democratic primary voters in Connecticut is going to like carry the day and change the outcomes for tens of millions of people. I mean, it was just fascinating to watch. It was gross. It was fascinating. Let's do this. Let's do Daniel Levy. Number 10, I think, is the just so that like, you understand what's going on with Blinken and the claims that they, somehow Netanyahu signed on to a ceasefire deal. They're not even, hopefully not even calling it a ceasefire deal because it's some type of like weird truce deal, which essentially puts us back to exactly where we are in, a week or two in terms of like what Israel's doing in Gaza. And it's clearly just an attempt to sort of like, at a time where the DNC is happening, they don't want protests to be discussed, and they want to try and, mitigate the problems that people have with Biden's positions and to some extent Harris's positions as well. Here is Daniel Levy, former Israeli peace negotiator. This is a guy I've interviewed probably over the course of 20 years, many times. And if you went back and saw that, you'd see his evolution when he became clearer and clearer, like, as Israel moved further and further right and becomes clearly more and more both unwilling and incapable of actually being a partner for any type of peace. Here he is on the BBC.
Every day, whether it's mass Palestinian civilian casualties still on a daily basis, whether that's the news that those families have received, whether that's confirmation that the refusal and inability to reach a deal earlier has meant that more of the Israelis being held in Gaza have perished, whether that's the ongoing deterioration in the humanitarian conditions and Palestinians being shunted from one area to another, never a safe zone, even when it's been declared as such, and the unedifying continued spectacle of an American diplomatic leadership and Secretary of State who simply isn't believed or seen as credible by anyone, as you said, Cassia. He is messaging quite differently to how the players are messaging. Now, there are in diplomatic efforts, sometimes there's a need for constructive ambiguity. Sometimes as you're getting something over the hill, you'll be saying one thing the parties can't themselves quite yet say. Sadly, that's not where we are today. Blinken is not only not a credible mediator, he's not an effective one either. And this isn't a personal thing, although he has handled this appallingly at a personal level, but this is institution-wide. This is the US. So how do we understand this spinning of such an optimistic take, despite the fact that it has very little grounding in reality? And that goes to the rest of your reporting this morning, Cassia, which is this is a lot about the convention in Chicago and the protesters and the need for the administration to say, hey, it's okay, we've got this. This looks positive. Don't disrupt Chicago. And the other thing is to prevent a wider regional. The Americans trying to make sure that Israel can continue its provocative military actions, but that there will not be blowback from Iran, and therefore it's deploying its military assets. And this is also highly risky. That's what's going on. Gaza and the appalling situation in Gaza, the hostages, but also, of course, the tens of thousands of dead Palestinians, the hundreds of thousands of displaced and suffering Palestinians, that is coming in a poor third.
And just to further that point, let's pop up what Axios had reported. I think it was today.
Yeah, it was yesterday or late last night today that so Murtaza Hussein has an astute point where he says, if you want to understand what's going on regarding the supposed Gaza ceasefire, the simplest explanation is that Anthony Blinken is Netanyahu's lawyer. Murtaza's with DropSite now, and he said, this is from Axios. Blinken said during a visit to Israel on Monday that Netanyahu had accepted the U.S. proposal and it was now incumbent on Hamas to follow suit. The statement baffled some Israeli officials who told Axios that Netanyahu's hard lines are actually making a deal much harder to reach. So this is like, I don't know, we're on the fourth or fifth round of claiming that Hamas is the one that's holding this up. And it's just, I was listening to NPR this morning and they're not even buying it because it's ridiculous.
Yep.
And this is the same thing they claimed ahead of the debate. That's what's so craven about this. Ahead of the Biden-Trump debate, they were saying that they're going to get a ceasefire deal through and Netanyahu's agreed to it. And all the reporting is like, no, he's not. So they keep putting the onus on Hamas. And there's a point where Hamas apparently hasn't been showing to the negotiations because they don't think that Blinken is an honest broker.
Oh, and by the way, they assassinated the guy carrying out those negotiations.
Exactly. Right. And why? So they said, that they told Al Jazeera that they think that the U.S. is buying time for the genocide through these negotiations. And it's hard to say like that's an unfair assessment from their end.
It's hard to say it's not.
Yep.
And especially when they're politicizing this moment and just trying to take the heat off themselves by making these announcements, it's disgusting.
When Biden says he recently talked to Kissinger, I think in the context of the Ukraine, did he mean Blinken? Because that's who Blinken belongs next to in hell, frankly.
How does he have any, this is the problem with this bear hug strategy. There's no even veneer of even-handedness. It's just, he has no credibility with anybody else except for Netanyahu, his client, apparently, in these
I'm not even sure I buy that's a... I'm not even convinced I necessarily buy that the strategy is we're going to hug him so tight that he'll listen to us as much
just
as
a hug strategy.
A hug strategy and sort of like we're going to hug him in the same way that like the Secret Service does a president who's someone's trying to shoot at. We're going to take the bullet for him.
And Bibi's like, let me get my shoes.
Where are my shoes?
Wait. I gotta kill more Palestinians. Wait. They're not starved to death enough. Wait.
Let's play this Tim Pool thing. Oh, I'm on vacation starting tomorrow. I mean, I'll be doing the thing tonight and tomorrow night and Thursday night, but from the day. So we got to do this Tim Pool. What clip is it? And then I want to do Candace Owens. The Candace Owens thing is really bad crap crazy. It really is amazing.
Yeah, it should be the last on the sheet there, Sam.
Here's Tim Pool. This is from a couple of days ago. You'll recall that in the wake of the Frost-Nixon interview, the Musk-Trump interview, that Trump said, like, I like you because you're going to go in and people go on strike. You just come in and you fire them all. You tell them you fire them. That's what I like about you, Musk. Now, it just so happens that as anemic as it can be at times, we do have a National Labor Relations Act. And it is illegal to threaten retaliation for people going on strike. And one of those ways, which is, really explicitly retaliation, is firing somebody. And that threat does not have to be explicitly delivered to an individual. I don't have to say, like, you're on strike, buddy. I'm going to fire you if you do it. It is a blanket sense of like, if you go on strike, I want my workers to know this, you're going to get fired now or in the future. That's illegal. And so when they did this, or when they posted this interview or did it live or whatever it was, the UAW the next day decided to sue. And big-brained Tim Pool has an issue with that because he's for the working man.
Auto Workers Union has filed complaints against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, alleging the two advocated for firing striking workers. So what? The former president and the owner of X held a conversation on Musk's platform this week.
Like I'll reiterate here, maybe he'll get to it in this article. So what? That's illegal. It is a threat. And your National Labor Relations Act says you cannot do that. Go ahead.
But check this out. Let's read. They say the United Auto Workers Union has filed complaints against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, alleging the two advocated for firing striking workers. So what? The former president and the owner of X held a conversation on Musk's platform, this we know. At one point, Trump and Musk were talking about workers who go on strike for better wages. Trump said, if workers go on strike and you say that's okay, you're all gone, so everyone is gone. Under federal law, a company cannot fire its employees if they are on strike, but you don't got to pay them. So there you go. The unfair labor practices charged were filed with the National.
Just in case you have the intelligence of Tim Pool, I'll explain to you. What he just said is a complete non sequitur. You
And who's he
cannot
giving that advice to?
You cannot fire somebody who goes on strike legally. You cannot threaten to fire somebody who goes on strike. That's true. When people go on strike, you don't have to pay them. But also, if you park somewhere illegally, you'll get a ticket. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about. I just wanted to make that clear. Go back a little bit. Incidentally, I want to tell you what happened here. What happened in this moment is that Tim Pool never read this article before he read it on air. He did not know that it was illegal to fire someone when they go on strike. And when he read that, he realized, oh God, this entire angle I took is completely unsubstantiated and I should have read this article. And so he says, but you don't have to pay them, which has nothing to do with anything. So just go back a little bit. I want you to watch how Tim catches himself here. These are fun moments.
On strike for better wages. Trump said, if workers go on strike and you say that's okay, you're all gone, so everyone is gone. Under federal law, a company cannot fire its employees if they are on strike, but you don't got to pay them. So there you go.
There you go.
The unfair labor practices charged were filed with the National Labor Relations Board. The UAW said Tuesday, just hours after the discussion, more than 1 million people tuned into the session. Quote, when we say Donald Trump is a scab, this is what we mean. When we say Trump stands against everything our union stands for, this is what we mean, said UAW President Shawn Fain in a news release. Musk himself has been outspoken against unions, criticizing them for creating inequality among employees. Tesla,
keep reading,
which is also owned by Musk, is the only auto manufacturer in the U.S. whose workers are not unionized. Bravo, Tesla. Shout out to the workers, manufacturer among
go back
employees.
a little bit. We need to hear what he says about Tesla here.
Himself has been outspoken against unions, criticizing them for creating inequality among employees. Tesla, which is also owned by Musk, is the only auto manufacturer in the U.S. whose workers are not unionized. Bravo, Tesla. Shout out to the workers. While multiple efforts to unionize
shout out to the workers?
Yeah, like that's the workers' decision. The bosses have been trying to do it. No, Tesla very regularly kills employees. Sometimes those are independent contractors, and it is not it's not a shout out to the workers scenario that they're not getting water breaks or whatever.
But
it's not. Incidentally, he may not know this, but the workers at all these other car plants, they decided they wanted a union. That's why the union is there. Yes.
Yes. But shout out to the special Tesla workers, the ones that remain who weren't fired for attempting to unionize. So this is the guy that's pro-worker. He's claiming, right, shout out to the workers who were still around if they didn't get fired by Elon Musk because they tried to make the decision to unionize. How is that a shout out to the workers? It's to the shout out to the people who remained.
Just unbelievable.
After Elon Musk. You know what? I'm going to make a prediction that Elon Musk is on Timcast in the next 2 or 3 months.
Very possibly.
Bravo, Tesla. Shout out to the workers. While multiple efforts to unionize employees at the company have been made, none have been successful. However, the company has been sued for implementing company policies that prevent workers from unionizing.
You hadn't read this story.
In filing complaint with Musk and Trump, UAW leadership is escalating its criticism of both men. President Fain has publicly criticized both in recent appearances, including at a Democratic rally attended by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz last week. Let me tell you my thoughts. We have this press release here, which we'll read from UAW directly, filing labor charges against Donald Trump and Elon Musk for attempting to.
Yeah, we can skip a little bit. He does go into why he doesn't think why he thinks unions aren't good, and it's because he worked at he was underpaid at one job, and then and so like why would you want to pay, if you're an underpaid grocery store worker, why would you want to pay a union fee? And that's partly because they could collectively bargain. And the other was like they focus on stupid stuff. But he gets back into it here, and we can just watch a little bit more.
All right, that's my personal. I'm not a fan of how these unions operate. That being said, like I actually don't care. Trump saying to fire them if they're on strike, I think you don't need to do that. I think it's
pause it for a
stupid.
second. Well, because when he started the video and he started to read the thing, he didn't know it was against the law.
Yeah.
And so he now has to backtrack, and you see the way that he did it. Well, you don't have to pay them. What difference does it make? Actually, I don't think you need to say that.
They don't even want a union anyway because unions don't work, but they shouldn't be stopped from it.
I mean, there's two things that this video shows. One is that Tim Pool is actually an anti-worker. But the other is that the dude doesn't even freaking read this stuff that he starts on. He has no idea what he's talking
Absolutely
about.
not.
No idea what he's talking about. And the only thing that he is skilled at is the ability to sort of like step back off of where he just knows exactly what the keywords are for the video that he's going to put up for his audience. He knows where he will cross the line with his audience. He did the same thing when he was like, almost like dabbling with supporting RFK. And then all of a sudden, like, Joe Rogan backed off. And so he backed off. This is when people say grifters, this is what they mean. And he knows, this is the way that he makes his money. And it's gross. He's an idiot. And it's also funny to watch him turn himself into a pretzel because he didn't know some of the basic facts of what he's talking.
Well, he doesn't know facts about politics. This is the problem when his show is just like focused on reacting to social media, and his algorithm is geared towards like, where are black people fighting in this part of the country? Or what is this homeless encampment? Let's do a deep dive into that. He's close with Elon Musk, by the way, because that post-millennial thing, Elon's always retweeting those guys. Those are associated with Tim Pool. That's when Elon said it was disturbing after Pool alleged that I was a pedophile, falsely, with no evidence. And like, let's also just, I remember just how he didn't even basically understand that the United States before, this was in the summer of 2023, he seemingly had no understanding of what U.S. policy was as it related to Israel. Like, he didn't,
or he knew he should stay away from it.
Well,
exactly.
I caught him he said he's like, I don't know enough about it to say, because he's anti-war, if we should fund Israel. He had very strong opinions about funding Ukraine, but not the top recipient of our military aid. And he doesn't know that that union busting is illegal. Either way, he's either willfully ignorant or misleading his audience, or he just doesn't know basic facts about U.S. politics.
That's not an or situation. It can be an and situation.
Yeah.
Tim Pool knows two facts. Elon Musk is daddy and Donald Trump is daddy. And all of his program will cohere to those two facts.
Alpha males, that's how they
high value males.
High value men, that's how they lead from behind. Tim Pool. That's what he does.
All right. We've run out of time. I should just take one more phone call because we had so many people hanging on the line. I don't know. Pick a number. Bradley, pick a number between 2 and 9.
7.
778 it is. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the final caller of the day.
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it's you. 778. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Mike. I'm calling from Vancouver Island in British Columbia.
Okay, Mike, what's on your mind? Got to be quick.
Okay, well, I hear a lot of of course, Gaza and Israel are very interested in that. What are Harris's policies regarding UNRWA? I haven't heard whether she's going. The United States is the last country to be the holdout since New Zealand resumed funding a couple months ago. And you would think of that's the one thing she can kind of say, not get too much flack for, because the United States is the last holdout.
Yep.
So has she said anything about that?
I have not heard her say anything in that regard, and I have not heard that question posed to her, frankly. That's a great question.
Yeah, because it makes me wonder, like, how serious then are you? Like, especially when her camp is releasing, like, oh, we support Israel against Iran, an Iranian-backed terrorist, but by your definition, isn't Hamas an Iranian-backed terrorist?
I mean, it really
So
sort of
makes me
depends on
kinda
who you
worried
talk
that-
to and what constitutes being backed. I mean, Iran certainly, my understanding of the reporting and our intelligence agencies believe that Iran had no idea what was happening in terms of October 7th. To the extent that they get, I mean, they get some funding, but it's not like Hezbollah. You know, I mean,
no, and I'm not comparing the two. I think what's happening is a parsing of words kind of thing. It's like, yes, Iran, at least nobody officially is saying that they had anything to do with October 7th, and I don't think anybody really does. It's just propaganda when they say they do.
No,
But
I know
they
what you're
definitely
saying.
do,
There's definitely like a wiggle room in that statement that Gordon put out on Twitter about Iran and Iran backed groups that could theoretically be interpreted either way. And so, I mean, I agree with you, but I think that's a good question, and I think it's one that she should answer. I hope that we get to another phase of the campaign after the convention, where as they go out and do press, that people start to ask some of these hard questions.
I really hope they do, because I can understand her position, especially with Bowman and Corey being and what happened with Nina Turner. Like, you're afraid of Israel, and rightly so. But this is something I think you can do that you'll piss Israel off, but you can at least do some really good
I also
help
think that the
for
American
people who
public would
really need
support it. I think the American public would support it. I think it's good politics. So we'll see. I appreciate the call, Mike. Gotta go.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. All right, folks, that ends the call-in portion of our program. That sound signifies the end of the call-in portion of our program. It's proof. Dizzy McFizzle, if I want to drink my shirt, I will. OS. Old Man Cedar's sundowning. Emma now has the chance to strike.
No.
Nate Heavens. I think it's worth noting that the FDA classifies water as generally recognized for safe and use of food. That's their safe classification. Just a thought. John in Omaha. Yeah, baby, let's go.
When we're at the CUSAM, we'll have David Cross release a op-ed in some newspaper.
Charlie Tuna, never pick a scab. Bullprog. This is Matt on interviewed about it. It's Sam's decision to make. Well, Sam's already said he's staying with the show. Well, it's his decision to make, and he will make that decision very soon.
He's also a very decent guy.
Trump is pulling what Nixon did with Vietnam by urging Israel prime minister refuse any deal around Gaza. I think that's possible, but I also think that Netanyahu doesn't need Trump's encouragement in that respect.
Yeah, I did see Zaid Gilani credulously act as if Trump is going to convince Netanyahu to do a ceasefire before the election, and I think that is probably not what Trump is doing.
No.
Somebody I missed it, saying that I'm a boomer, and I'm first of all, I'm not a boomer, but wanted to know what I meant by the Frost Nixon. David Frost was a famous interviewer. I think it was from BBC, maybe. And
at least the UK.
He had a big sit down with Nixon, and it was like a big interview that one of the most famous, probably, media interviews ever, I would think. Pretty close.
Yeah, does no one remember the movie?
Yeah. Did Frank Langella win the Oscar for playing?
He was nominated. I don't believe he won.
I don't remember the movie.
I think it was Nixon's first big sit down after Watergate, where he said, if the president does it, that means it's not a crime.
That means it's not illegal.
And he turned out to be right.
That's
according
true.
to the right-wing
Supreme
Supreme Court.
Wow.
Press controls and
forever.
executive immunity.
Sam, chat wants to know how many buttons you have open. I just have 2. Disco Stew. AOC's DNC speech was great and suggests a bright future for the Democratic Party. It shows what can be accomplished by organizing within the Democratic Party despite its many faults. It's embarrassing that just weeks ago, DSA pulled their endorsement of their best-known proponent, Fortunately, politics is just an aesthetic for too much of the DSA. They seem more concerned with enforcing rigid ideological stances than actual outcomes. I need to read more into that, but on its face, I think it's. I think it was a mistake. But
well, I mean, she did that.
I'd like to know what that person's doing. What groups are you? What pressure groups are you doing that's helping to achieve good policies, whether it's ceasefires? I'm just curious what other people are doing besides saying not like that, because I frankly think that AOC's owes a lot to that movement, and I think
she does.
Where this country's going, and the economic policy owes a lot to, say, Bernie Sanders. So, no, I'm not ready to say those people are so aesthetically minded. And I'd be curious what this person's productive agenda is, rather than just shitting on DSA.
It seems like kind of a mutual thing. It's a bit of a mutual breakup. She's distancing herself. She has broader ambitions. So I just like that. I mean, and the New York chapter has not gone as far as the national one, is my understanding.
But it's not DSA's job to follow a politician that's playing an inside game that isn't being communicated to the actual movement. Like, I think it's ridiculous to put the heat on the DSA, which I think has a lot of soul searching to do, but I don't think it should come from people like that from the outside. That I think just saying work within the Democratic Party, because I don't think that's what Bernie did. I don't think that's what AOC did when she got into the Congress. She was not emphasizing it like that. So no, I reject that. I am.
Vinny YP says the DSA made the correct decision. You can't have a real socialist platform if you compromise your principles. Union Jack, guys, this is my 1,000th something attempt. Why are we ignoring Doug Emhoff and his Zionist nature? He is literally going to fundraisers and closed door and even some public meetings where he's openly saying Kamala won't be changing Israel policy. He even said in October there are not two sides on this issue and talking about the Israel-Palestine issue. He's sick as much as Biden when it comes to Gaza. Why are we not focusing on her husband? I mean,
that seems wild to me to say that. Everyone in the Democratic Party is pro-Israel. I mean, this is just like that's the case, but it's just can they be pushed? First of all, his kid, Kamala's, I guess, step kid, but also child in that way, posted a Gaza fundraiser on her social media. The New York Post picked it up. She deleted it. So, like, you want to play the family game, there's that too. And, like, yeah, this is the kind of ceremonial stuff that the husband of the vice president is going to be doing. I think this just, like, is crazy to say that her policies would be, reflective of that. I don't know.
Kirby says the DSA did not pull an endorsement. They internally decided not to endorse her because she won her primary and they had no leverage. My understanding is that they revoked her membership and they both, they left a membership, but I haven't read into it. Dude Guy Pal. I really do not understand the reaction to the AO speech. One of her own was taken in off her primetime speech to speak about economic populist politics. She knocked it out of the park. The whole arena was on their feet chanting AOC. I love you guys, but like you used to say, Bernie's big mistake was not playing the inside game. AOC is doing exactly that, and now she's abandoning the left. I don't get it. What was she supposed to do exactly? On Gaza,
we just said what she should have done. We played Warnock, who is not in the DSA, and I said that would have been a smarter tactic.
Slightly better.
Let me finish this statement. On Gaza, Warnock is a better messenger to normie Dems versus someone like AOC. I trust AOC will not abandon her convictions. We should be thrilled that AOC is being embraced by the normie wing of the party. You cannot win elections without having them on your side.
Why is she being embraced by the DNC? Is it because they love her economic message and wanted it foregrounded? I think that is a very naive view of why that decision was made. I think it was more likely that she represents DSA and DSA was outside the convention protesting it because of the Gaza policy. That's why she was chosen, in my opinion, and not because the people who make that decision wanted to signal a move on economic policy.
Our point was just that she's not a normie Democrat, so our expectations of her are to represent the youth people, younger folks, to actually try to push the envelope as opposed to repeating the literally baseline State Department copy about the Biden administration's negotiations with Hamas and Israel. That she really should have done more than that. And I think that's, I mean, we're in the middle of a genocide, and she's one of the only members of Congress who's called it a genocide, but then goes on stage and repeats that ceasefire line while there's protests outside. That's not right. I don't agree with that.
Like, I think, look, if you want us to say she's one of the better Congress people, yeah, I'll grant that.
Agree.
Who cares? She's still party to a genocide and lying, giving Blinken's lies about it.
Yeah, I just thought she could have done more. It's not the end of the world, I mean, for me. But
we have to be consistent about these things, not about helping whatever Democrats win elections, because frankly, that's AOC's job, and I think she's got that part under control.
Woke Willie, as someone who's covered several conventions, do you agree that there's been a significant progressive shift? If so, how do we use this, no matter how superficial, as a source of hope for folks who are being exploited by bad faith internet commentators to disengage from electoral politics? I mean, I do think that the party has moved, left on the spectrum over the course of the past 20 years. I'm not so concerned about, I don't know how big of a phenomenon folks are being exploited by bad faith internet commentators. I think, I think we push back on it by the way that we push back on it in this show. I mean,
too much people are engaging. People are going out to vote and stuff. Like the problem is people aren't engaging in socialist policies, as far as I'm concerned. But they seem to be engaging in the political processes as, like the previous IMer said, normie Democrats. I think I'd like to see a bit more ideology in that, but I don't see like this Doorism depression going on. I think that's maybe an online phenomenon.
They are way more marginal than they were in 2016.
Without a doubt.
People.
Well, because
the Democrats have changed to a degree. They've improved.
Democrats have changed, but the whole promise of the thing, like, it's all pretend. It all became, like, it all fell apart. Like there was no genuine effort to primary these people. There was no genuine effort to develop a slate of primary people like they claim. There was no genuine effort to build any type of party infrastructure or third party infrastructure. It was all just click. It was all for clicks.
And to just buttress this point, like, I don't know what disunity is being discussed, because yes, AOC got the biggest applause, but so did Hillary Clinton. Got huge applause too. Everyone in that convention is they're Democrats registered, and they're Democratic partisans. Among Democrats or people to the left, it's more unified than I think either of the past two presidential elections.
Snarkanorski, as a longtime listener, I feel slightly bad for not having an opinion on this AOC and the DSA beef. All right, 3 more.
That's fine. That's good. If you're not in DSA, you shouldn't.
He was joking. Or she was joking.
Gotcha.
Or they were joking. Nasty question. Please dig up the clip from Hassan's live stream yesterday where he runs into Ryan Grimm and Sagar and Jetty. All right, I'll try and look for that
next time.
Best Trib. What is this breakthrough from the Baga's feeble impeachment of Biden's family making deals with foreign adversaries? Were they holding out in hopes it would wound his campaign, but it didn't work out because he dropped out? Probably. Interesting theory. To keep running against the guy who's not running anymore.
Yeah.
And the final I am of the day, Woke Willie. Oh, I just read that one. Shoot. Well, let's see. Liberal artist Robert Ingersoll is rolling in his grave. Very sad how far oratory has fallen in New York. Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job today. Folks, I'm going to try again to stream tonight. Wish me luck. At the very least, we'll definitely have something tomorrow night.
And Thursday night.
Bye, Bradley.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.